You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to thewritingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hi, my name is Chris, and you are watching the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's Writing Community Chat Show. It's amazing to be back here after, if you've been watching this for a while or listening on the podcast, thank you for doing so. But you will know that I've been away doing a charity walk last week, something I've been building up to for months and months and months. And I completed it. And with all your guys' support and your comments were amazing. That really helped me get through that massive walk in France. Thank you so much, firstly, for those messages. But also thank you so much, massively thank you for your donations, because I personally raised £2,440-ish, which funds are still coming in amazingly. And as a collective, the 68 Walkers told us that we raised at the end of the walk 180-something thousand pounds, which is just incredible. So thank you for that support that you guys gave me. It's really good to be back. And in some other news about the show, season 9 ends next week's show, and I can't believe that. You know, each season in this show has been ginormous, over sort of between 10, 15, 20 shows at a time, and we will be starting season 10 the week after. And season 10 is going to be a little different. It's going to be freshened up, and there's some big news coming about the show for season 10, so please do stick around and check that out. Hello to you in the chat. If you have questions throughout the show, please do fire them in. This is a discussion panel show. We're going to discuss everything fantasy and possibly more. And I'm sure our guests tonight are going to tell me about fantasy, because I'm a horror writer, of course, and I'd love to know a bit more about this. And of course, how to get into horror writing, fantasy writing. So it's going to be very interesting, especially with all the things that we see on telly these days. The School for Good and Evil, Soman Chinini was a previous guest on this show. That's just dropped on Netflix. It's a massive fantasy adaptation of a book. So it's really good to see these things kicking in. So it's going to be great to chat to our guests, and there's 3 of those on tonight. So without further ado, let me get them on, and we can get the discussion going. So first of all, our first guest has released her first book at the age of 15, which is just outstanding. She has now over 20 books listed on Amazon. Oh, sorry, I've done this in the wrong order, but that's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elizabeth Wheatley. Hello, Elizabeth. How are you doing?
Hello, Christopher. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining me. And in classic WCCS fashion, I've mixed up the entries to the show, but nonetheless, here you are, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I specialize in writing about, I describe it as dangerous girls and boys who love them. But everything's fantasy, so I'm very excited to talk about that.
Amazing. And where are you coming from right now, if you don't mind me asking?
Austin, Texas.
Texas. Wow. Okay. Fantastic. So next guest, let me see if I can get this in the right order now. Okay. First up, secondly up. I'm really getting this right. Is a blogger and author who started writing at the age of 11. So there's another connection there with really young writing and getting into this at a young age. Since then, she's been writing short stories, novellas, and trilogies. Please welcome Kaitlyn Deann. Hello, Kaitlyn.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Thank you for joining me. I hope you're doing well as well.
Yes, very well. Thank you. I am thrilled to be here. I published my first book when I was 17. And
wow, okay.
So Elizabeth and I actually met that way because we're both the same age. And so we both had books out at a very young age, and we both live in Texas. And so it just like made sense to start a friendship there. So that's how we know each other. But yeah, I write in fantasy. I write fantasy romance.
Amazing. So both of you started writing at a young age and have continued to work that craft since. So it'll be interesting to see if any of you have kind of had any massively different experiences in that sense. And perhaps you've got tips for someone of a young age that perhaps could who's just starting out at that age, you could have some tips for, but we'll find out. And our final guest, we have someone whose stories revolve around gods, monsters, and the royals who petition them. Please welcome Ziva. Hello.
Hey, Chris.
Ziva.
You got it right.
Nearly
How
got
are
it right. I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. Are you doing well?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm in London at the moment. Yeah. And I'm not a child writer. I didn't publish like in my teens. My first book came out when I was 21, and it was in the non-fiction genre. So I've just moved into fantasy quite recently with my first series, Age of the Anathema, and take it from there.
Yeah, that's really interesting to go from, say, non-fiction into fantasy, and that's a big leap, and that's quite an interesting thing for me to talk about, because for someone, then we'll go straight into this, if someone wanted to jump into the world of fantasy from a different genre, what advice would you give them? Because that's quite a big task.
I would give them I would say use what you know, because my first genre was in spiritual literature, Christian literature to be exact, and that does inform a lot of my stories now, because like you said, I do write stuff about gods, monsters, and the royals, the damaged royals who petition them, and it does inform a lot of my, like, well, the show's about world building. It does inform a lot about my world building. It revolves around the religious systems mostly. So I would always say use what you know. If you're coming from a specific background, it's easier to transition with that information already.
Amazing. So everybody then together, what I'd love to first find out is, as a reader and as a writer, what attracts you to fiction? So if you're reading, does a cover grab you? Because fictional covers are often really sort of impressive and exciting to me, compared to, say, a lot of, say, what they called airport reads that are very similar in their fashion. And do you have a preference over sort of indie writing or established, or does that matter to you? Has anyone got an answer for that one?
Most of what I read now is indie if it's fiction. I feel like there's fewer rules for indie authors, and I like that. A lot of times I've noticed, like, I love traditionally published authors. So if any traditionally published authors are listening, you're beautiful, you're amazing, and your work's fantastic. But I've noticed that a lot of times traditional publishing will push authors towards a specific style of editing. And sometimes I like the quirkiness of indie books. So in general, I prefer indie books if they're fiction, but I read a lot of traditionally published fiction. So, and as far as what draws me to it, usually the premise and the tropes. I shop by trope. So I will forgive a bad cover, but I like it to have a nice cover. Just a little judgy there.
I second everything Elizabeth said, and I tend to be more visual. And so if it does have a bad cover, but like it sounds really good, I will be hesitant to read it, just because I'm just like very visual. So I think it just depends on the person, on the individual. And especially like if Elizabeth tells me like, hey, this book is a great book, because she's like, some of her recommendations I trust probably more than almost anybody else's. I've already told her that. Like, she knows this. But like, because I've read a lot of books I just didn't like, and we have the same likes and dislikes, and not same, but pretty similar. And so when she tells me, hey, I really like this book, and I'm like, no, the cover's not impressive, I probably will read the book though, because Elizabeth recommended it to me.
It is
but
impressive.
The cover is very important.
Yeah, when there's often that sort of stereotype that people say you shouldn't judge a book by the cover, but we all secretly do, don't we?
Yeah,
often
we do, definitely.
Yeah, we often do.
100%.
We often do.
Yeah.
But I would read a book, mostly I shop by author, to be fair. So it's usually the authors that I've read before that I like. I just stick to them, and then anything they recommend or they like endorse, I would read that. And then recommendations from Kaitlyn, Elizabeth now, because she has recommended 2 books to me, and I bought the first one, I really liked it, so I bought the second one. So yeah, I believe I can trust her recommendations.
Elizabeth's getting us all on these other books. But to be fair, Elizabeth probably does way more reading than any of us.
Yeah, I think so too.
Out of interest, then, Elizabeth, how many books do you say you read in a month?
In a month, I'm not sure.
No?
I've read 79 this year.
Wow.
I'm
I've
not even like, I know people who read more than that, so I'm not impressed with myself, but
I am.
Stop it.
Yeah, that's a lot of books.
I've read 2 books this year.
Mm-hmm.
That's more than most people.
I've started a few. I go that far. Yeah, so let's talk about fantasy. What was your attraction for all of you? Obviously, as a writer of fantasy, you must be a fan of fantasy. What's the attraction for you in the world of fantasy? Because we're going to talk about world building soon. And world building is something that's, I find as a writer, that is a massive thing to be able to do as a writer. It's a massive thing in your arsenal. If you can create a world, it's huge and very impressive. So what attracts you to fantasy? What's the main thing for you guys?
I like historical settings, but not necessarily the way history turned out.
Okay.
So I like tweaking things and changing things. I'm like kind of writing fan fiction about history in a way, and I do a lot of research, maybe more than I should, but into specific topics. And I really like the empowerment that comes along with fantasy. There's a lot of problems that this world has that we can remedy or explore in a safe environment, or in a way that, like, we can fix those problems in fantasy that we couldn't necessarily fix them in this world. And that's always drawn me to it.
I think fantasy is a wonderful way to escape, like what Elizabeth was saying, a lot of the problems that we do have in this world that you can't fix. You want to fix, that you as an individual can't fix. It would take like the collective of the globe to fix, and we're not all on the same page about certain things, and so that's kind of impossible. But well, it feels that way anyway, right? But in fantasy books, though, you can escape to those worlds, and that's the intrigue for me too.
It's quite interesting. You took. Sorry, Zia.
No, sorry. It's the same for me. It's the escapism. I think that's the same for me as well.
Elizabeth, when you talked about kind of the problems that we face in our world and being able to translate that into a fantasy world and tackle those problems from a different angle, and perhaps not directly approach that, but kind of do it in a separate way, how would you do that without kind of perhaps offending people or stepping on toes? Is there a way you kind of consciously do that, or is that kind of kept in part of your writing?
I'm not like an activist writer. I just have like strong beliefs about things, and that I realize, like, usually I realize after I've written the book, oh, that's about that. So a lot of things I am really involved in the feminist movement, and so but like, I have my perspective on it isn't like, my perspective on it's a little different because of my background. So when I write about it, I try. Usually I see a lot of authors, when they feel confident about something, they will give a character a monologue that like lays out everything and just hits everything on the nose. And you don't want to do that. You want to use a story to illustrate the issue and illustrate the problem, preferably in a way that is at least respectful to all parties involved, even if you don't personally respect all the parties involved.
You're right.
So I try to write from a positive perspective. I don't like writing negatively, where it's just like, oh, these people are bad. I would rather write like, here's how we can fix this problem. And I'm not sure how to describe it more specifically than that.
I think you're totally right I totally agree with everything you're saying. Because if we as fantasy authors answer like every question, and you don't leave anything up to the reader's interpretation of the character and their belief system too, then that can come across as kind of unauthentic in a lot of ways, because the way we perceive the world is very different than our neighbor. And so we want to be able to, when we give a book to a reader, to be able to let them perceive it the way they need to perceive it, without compromising your own beliefs also as the writer. You know, that should be should go without saying. I definitely, when I write in my beliefs. A lot of my inspiration comes from biblical teachings and morality and stuff like that, because, well, I'm a Christian, and so that's like a lot of my worldview is centered around Christianity, and as well as other topics too that I'm actually pretty passionate about, but I don't go around talking about with everyone. And so like Elizabeth was saying, like with feminism and certain things about feminism, I have some issues with modern day feminism, but that I mean, you can't agree 100% with everyone on everything, I think. And so that does come across a little bit in my books too, just like it does in Elizabeth's as well. So that was just like me adding on to what she said, because I agree with what she said too.
Yeah, fantastic. Siva, when we just mentioned research in the world of fantasy, is there a way that you approach that differently to your previous writing?
I'm a pantser, so I tend to do a lot of writing and then like make notes on what I've written, and after that I would research. I have a lot of friends in different sectors, so for instance, if like I'm writing a fight scene and someone gets hurt, I will call a doctor afterwards and be like, okay, I wrote this. When is this possible? And they'd be like, no, they would bleed out too quickly. So,
like when you called me about the pregnancy stuff, I was like, well.
Yeah.
I like this approach, just phoning your friends for a different outlet.
And they would fix those things for me, make it more realistic, and then I fix the story. Some things, if I'm really interested in, I would do research on. Like there was once I was doing research on Viking ships, and I spent a whole week researching how to build Viking ships, like the history of it, the structure of Viking ships, like what makes them sail, which areas, like which seas, and it took me a week to do that. And in the end, I literally just put in one line mentioning the description of the ship in the whole
Happens
story.
Every time.
Yeah, so if you're writing, I would say if you're a pantser, just write and then fix it afterwards.
Yeah, I'm definitely team pantster. What about you, Elizabeth and Kaitlyn?
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Pantsters or plotters?
Yes. So
yes.
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 Yes. Just yes.
I have an idea of where the story's going. I have I have to have an end goal in mind, but every time I try to just write down the steps to get to the end goal, it hasn't worked out. So I just stopped. I stopped doing it. I just write towards the ending I know is going to happen, and the ending might be tweaked from my original plan, but Plantster, I think it's been called.
Plantster, yeah. That's me too. Yeah, I can't. I do like bullet points, but my bullet points always end up so different from my final draft. And so like I don't see the point anymore other than just like vomiting onto a page so that I can just get the ideas out. That way I can move forward. And so that's pretty much my my routine. That's how I do it. But yeah, I usually have an end goal in mind. Now the end goal may change like through the writing because the characters change, and I may not always be aware of how the characters are going to end up from draft 1 of book 1 to the final draft of book 5 kind of thing. So it's kind of hard to predict that. Definitely.
So I'm guessing that your research is all kind of, I love Ziva's idea there, just phoning people. But generally, I guess you go on the route of researching online and that kind of thing. But have any of you actually had physical research and gone to sort of places for that purpose?
Yeah. Go for it, Elizabeth.
Where's the best place you've been for research purposes?
Oh, I did a LARP to it's a live action role play to get a feel for
is that just like an American thing?
I guess
because they had no idea what it was.
Okay, but real life, and you're actually dressed up and you have weapons that are safety approved and all that. And so I got to experience like how chaotic it was trying to keep all of these untrained soldiers together with what's like analog weapons, and it was like what it was like to run in a full Viking kit in the rain in the long grass, and it was very intense.
I love
And
your
like
pictures.
the thing is that your brain knows that the weapons are fake, but your the cortisol in your body does not. So it was very intense. It definitely gave me a perspective on writing fight scenes, because I do a lot of that, and figuring out what it takes to outrun an angry knight in armor and that sort of thing.
And because of her experience at LARP, she is my go-to person for battle scenes.
Yeah. Well, I can see on the book covers in the background, which are Elizabeth's books,
Yes.
swords straight
Yes.
away and bow and arrows. So
Yes.
so I can see where this is going.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. I don't think when I've seen or talked to other authors, when they speak about going places, it's normally somewhere, a nice location to go to and experience the culture and the vibe in the city. I don't think I've ever had anyone on the show that's just dressed up in battle gear and gone for it. So fair
You've
play.
never had Elizabeth.
Never, no. So I like that. And you know, mentioned dragons. Wales has a dragon on the flag. Just saying, very cool. Ziva, you were going to say something, I think, about that.
Well, I haven't tried LARP, but
Yeah.
this is not safety approved, and I would not recommend you try this at home. But I did have a character who was locked in a dungeon for a certain period of time with like specific meals that were served, like porridge. And I did try just to find out, like, how would your body react if you were locked in a dungeon? I didn't go to a dungeon. I just locked myself in my room for a specific period of time. I tried to.
And you ate just porridge.
Was that just locked?
Like the specific times they were given, and like, yeah, feeling like what my body actually went through and seeing. It was a good experience. I would not advise you to try at home.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of thinking that would just sound a bit like lockdown when we all locked ourselves
Sounded
away.
like 2020.
Yeah. You keen? I think this says that's madness. Writers scare me. Yeah, there's some questionable internet research history from writers. I wouldn't go there. Yeah. So that's an amazing story. Locking yourself away for
the wildest thing I did was get pregnant and have 2 kids. That was my research.
Yeah.
Like, how does pregnancy feel and childbirth feel? I would not write those things until I experienced it, and I did it 18 months apart, and which I would like to say was not writing related. But it kind of was, because I wanted to see how, when you had kids close together, like how your body responded. And I was in labor only 5 hours with a second child, by the way. And she came slipping out. So that's how my body responded anyway. Anyway, that was my writing research. And I got 2 wonderful kids out of it.
Yeah. Don't try that at home either. Unless not for
unless you really want kids, don't try that at home either.
Yeah. Ziva, perhaps we should bring this battle recreation to the UK. Maybe we can kick that off here.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, y'all definitely need LARPing over there.
LARPing, that's what it's called, right? So let's talk about your favorite sort of world building authors. Do you have any yourselves?
Brandon Sanderson. That's like anyone who reads fantasy probably knows who Brandon Sanderson is. He's just he has an entire editorial team helping him keep track of all his world building.
Wow.
But he has multiple series that take place within the same universe, and they're loosely interconnected, and how the magic systems interact with each other. And there's like the world hopper characters who show up in every series, and everybody always tries to find them. But it's the depth of world building he goes into, and the richness of it, how he has things sprinkled in without having like massive exposition. I think it's absolutely brilliant the way he does world building.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds incredible with the amount of detail that goes into world building, which is what really fascinates me, and I don't read too much fantasy at all, and I've read one or two things in the past for the show, which I've really enjoyed actually. But it just blows my mind that people can actually, as you mentioned there, he's got a team behind him to get that detail right, but then to do that on your own, I think is incredible. So would you have any tips now as an experienced fantasy writer, any of you, for someone who wants to write fantasy and build worlds? What world building tips could you give?
Have a world building document.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is where you can post like pictures, and so inspirational pictures, and you can keep track of, like, anytime you mention any world building throughout the document, you can kind of like copy and paste over into the world building document, so you can keep track of what you said. Like if you said the trees smell like peppermints from my trilogy, it's just like that's needs to stay consistent, and so like make sure you keep that, put that in your document. Like I totally agree with what Ziva was saying. I didn't mean to interrupt you though. Okay. Go ahead, Ziva. Anything else that you can put into the document? I like hijacked her statement.
That's pretty much it. Like those sorts of things, like with your religious systems, your geography, topography, character names. Sometimes you can go as far as writing down like the story plot, so that you have the plot points if you're a plotter. I do that in reverse. I write the story, and then I have in the document, like chapter by chapter, I write like a synopsis of like what happened in this chapter, and then I sometimes do it character by character in the chapters. So like this happened to this character in this chapter, and this in this character in this chapter, and by the end of it, you can see what's inconsistent, what's consistent, and if you want to write other books based on that world, it's easier to do so because you have a starting point.
Fantastic.
That's much more organized than mine, but mine is just a hodgepodge of information. Like I wish I was that organized.
Yeah, I like the idea of having the synopsis per chapter, but also there for returning on if you're writing a series. It's a really good example. Sylvia in the chat says Cassandra Clare has a Bible to keep a record of all her things, of all the things. So perhaps that's good. Yeah. And also, Sylvia said, should we go to Wales to research realistic interactions with dragons? And Eugene says it depends on what kind of whales you're going for. Okay. In one of the books I've been building, someone speaking Welsh to you may literally turn you into a fern. So just to let you know, we don't really have dragons. Well, we do, but we never see them because they're hidden away. But yeah, but you can come to Wales. All right, let me get back on my questions. I've gone a bit weird here. Okay, do you have any? We just talked about resources, I guess, for world building. And what tips might you have for someone who wants to write fantasy for the very first time?
I'd like to use templates for cultures and characters. So a lot of times, like I have one culture in particular in the Dangerous Assassin series. I'm like, okay, this one, they're like Northern England-ish in the late medieval period. And then that's like mentally all of my descriptions and the root words need to come from that period or from that etymology. Or like if there is a culture where I'm like, it's loosely based on Wales around the early mid-medieval period. And so I adapt things from there. And it's been helpful for me instead of just like being like, oh, you build everything from scratch. It's like I'm going to do research on an existing culture and take and adapt parts of it to suit my own ends, which sounds a bit selfish, but it's been very helpful to me instead of just like building everything from scratch. It's like I have one empire. I'm like, this one's based on Rome and this one's based on the Habsburgs. And so it really helps mentally for me when I'm crafting out the culture and the story, how I want them to feel or come across. But I do have a story Bible, which is like tabs by like geography, divinities, characters. Like I do have that story Bible as well. But in addition to that, I I like using real world things as templates.
It's
Even
fascinating.
I do have. I'm
Go on.
sorry.
No, go on.
Even with like mythological creatures that I have in my books, I decide like, okay, this is a fake creature, but I'm going to base it as like the base build for this creature is going to be this animal, and then I'm going to adapt this animal's behavior as it needs to, as I need it.
Yeah. Like what were in the Warlords of the Sand Sea, those what were they called? The
The
little like
Shirishas.
yes, yeah. They're like they act like horses, but they are like more like reptiles,
Yes, the
like
reptilian
lizards.
horses.
Yeah,
Or like
I
the
love
Kelpie.
that.
The Kelpie's
Oh yes, yeah,
behavior is more predatory, even though it's horse shaped. So
yeah. Yeah, so
Amazing.
I agree with that completely. For first time fantasy or people wanting to delve into fantasy, my number one tip would be to read fantasy. That would be your
Yeah.
best research, or your best way to dive into that vibe. You know, I mean, every book's going to be different too. Find the section of fantasy that you fit. For one, there's so much. It's like really broad, but you find where you fit, find your people, and then definitely get started. Do some reading though, into that genre, because you're gonna be better suited or better equipped for writing in that genre once you really know what people are reading.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I was going to ask Elizabeth when I interrupted you twice. I apologize. Both of you, Elizabeth and Kaitlyn, from writing from a young age that you both did. You mentioned how you've kind of built that portfolio over time. Has that been something you have been working on since you were younger, or is it something that you kind of realized that was helpful? You just kept sort of documenting all those things and building that world? Because I imagine that documentation of all of these things play into a lot of your series or different books because you've got that information there.
For some of the stories, I suppose, yeah. Like the one I'm working on right now, the Forgotten Countrymen series is a 12-year-old series. I've been working on it for ages, and
Wow.
it's evolved a lot over time, and it's become what it is today because of it aging. And me aging as well, you know, going through life experiences and figuring out, having the experiences with different kinds of people and experiencing, you know, having children and actually being a parent and understanding what it is to be a parent. Now I can better write in a parent's perspective instead of like just writing in this teenager's perspective and sounding like a whiny little brat sometimes. So, which was why I was like, I gotta let this age, because I was like mature enough as a 15-year-old to realize, like, you know what, maybe I'm not mature enough to write this story yet. So I let it sit. But other than that, I don't think yes, writing young, but like helped to kind of build that up, but also you get new ideas when you're older too, or at least you can take those old ideas and you rework them completely to where it's something new altogether. So I don't know if I would say that it becomes like easier because you had these ideas like way long ago. It just depends. It just depends on what the idea was and what from this pile of idea, what is actually gold and which is trash.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's probably a speck of gold in a pound of trash. So that's for me personally, of course.
Yeah.
I know this is not my question, but based on what Kaitlyn said, I agree with what she said, because a lot of times as a young author you write stuff, but you need to let it mature. You need to let yourself as a writer mature, and with time, there are things that only time can teach you. There are things you can only get from experience and writing over and over and over again. And there is no rush. I think a lot of times people feel under pressure to publish early or to publish young, but there is no rush. It's better to write a novel and let it mature and write the best you can write than write something you're going to regret in the next 10 years. I mean, obviously, with the age of self-publishing, you can self-publish, you can republish, you can work things and change things, but it's always best to publish what you are proud of. Put your best work out there and publish what you are proud of. But there's some things that only time can do for your story.
Amazing. Great answer.
In addition to what Ziva was saying too, though, I think it's important to know also that no matter where you are at the moment, if you publish right now and this is the best you can give, probably in 10 years you're not going to like it. Like probably in 10 years you're going to be disappointed with it, because that's just the mark of a growing writer. If you're growing, you're going to look back on the stuff you've published in the past and you're going to be like, ooh, I could do that so much better now. And so I just wanted to add that in, because even though at the time when you published it, it's just like, yeah, that's the best you did. And a lot of people liked it and you actually did really well. But you, at this point now in our current day, right, you look back and you're just like, I could have written that so much better. That's me personally with my first book when I wrote when I was 17. I was just like, I just look back and I'm like, oh man, this is a cringy book. Like, wow, okay. But it's just because I can. Kaitlyn. Thank you, Elizabeth. Actually means a lot coming from you, because I love all your recommendations. So I do appreciate that. But I do look back and I do know I could write this story better. If I could redo it right now, I could write it better. But I think that's just a mark of me having matured as a writer.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And a lot of us can relate to that, I'm sure. From my very first book to the second book, the second one was so much better just from the evolution of me growing as an author. And that was a short time in between those two things. So I imagine from a long time of writing, you continually improve on knowing your flaws, which is essentially something we must do to improve. And the reading experience, like you said, the more you read, the better things become in your arsenal as a writer. So they're both great tips that you said. So thank you for those. What are you into at the moment? Any of you into a kind of series about fantasy, or any films you watch? Anything that jumps out at you kind of visually?
I'm waiting on Dangerous Assassin book 3. Thank you.
Okay.
It's Elizabeth's third book coming out in December, I think, right? December?
Yes, it is December. I'm waiting. Actually need to finish recording the audiobook today. So
Are you doing that yourself, Elizabeth?
Yes, I also do audiobook recording.
She's a wonderful narrator, actually. Like, I listen to them all on the audiobook because, like, as a mom, I just have to be constantly moving. And so I listen to them on the audiobook. Wonderful narrator. That's the only way I'm able to read books. But yeah, no, I'm waiting on that. I'm really invested into her series right now. I'm just like waiting.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Ziva, what about you?
Well, I'm starting Dangerous Assassin next week, so yeah, I've been looking forward to it. It's just
all of our answers are like, yeah, Elizabeth's books.
That way. Buy. I can't even point there. That way. Buy the books. I'll put a link in the description for you guys. You can all find it and you can all book club it. You all read it together. Go on.
Yes.
So okay, let's talk about Elizabeth's series then, and each of your own books. If you were going to have your books optioned and created into a series or a film, and they said you could have one actor of your choosing for your characters, is there anyone that you think, yes, I'd like them?
I would personally like it to be an actor no one's heard of.
Okay.
I would just like the actors. There were actors who I based characters in my books on, but they're like, this was like 15 years ago or whatever. So the actors are no longer suitable for those characters. Maybe Katie McGrath to play the villain, the Empress Vesha in this series. Nice. But what?
I said nice.
Okay, guys, yes, Katie McGrath is who I pictured as the Empress. But I would like the main characters to be actors nobody's heard of before.
Yeah, I kind of get that. That makes sense. Ziva, what about yourself?
I've never really thought of this because I would rather it became an anime series than
okay.
Oh my god, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. So I think I picture it more as that sort of thing. I've not really thought about actors because I'm not that into movies, to be fair. So, I like books. I read books, and I tend to stick to books. So I don't have any actors. Timothy Chalamet probably, but I don't know where to fit him. I just know I'd like him in one of the movies probably.
I'll change that. I'll change that question for you, Ziva. Okay, if instead of an actor, if you could have one voice narrate your series or your books, what voice would you choose?
Elizabeth.
She's already asked her. She's like, how much would you charge?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Show
You guys are just
discount.
buttering me up like a biscuit here.
Yeah, you should listen to the audiobook narration, because I prefer to read. I'm a print book person, hardbacks specifically. I prefer to read my books in hardback, but I listen to the audiobook the sample narration of her book, and I was like, I have to have this. And then I got the ebook on Kindle, the one that comes with the ebook audiobook deal, and Amazon messed it up, and I was on the phone to them for like 20 minutes. Like, I need the audiobook. I don't care what you do with the ebook, but I need that audiobook. So her narrations are really good.
Wow.
And I'm not exaggerating. They are really good.
Thank you so much.
Maybe we'll get arcs. Buttering you up for arcs.
I'm trying to think of what the audio version of ARCs could be. It's like, I can't figure it out, but fantastic. I think Neil Gaiman for me is a fantastic narrator of his books. I think it sounds so good. Kaitlyn, you didn't answer that. Do you have an actor in mind?
So for the series I'm currently working on, only one for the main character. I did not think about anybody else, and I usually don't think of actors. Like Asiva said, I don't really think of actors fitting any characters, and just like also like Elizabeth said, I don't think this actor would fit very well anymore because he's like already older, and this character's 17, and he's not 17 anymore. And so, but basically, if you guys, well, I don't know what other shows he's in, but I watched him on The 100, Bob Morley. He plays the character, oh crap, I can't remember his first name, but Blake.
Right.
What's his name? I'm trying. Oh my
I don't
God.
know.
Bellamy. I'm like, it's one of my favorite names. Bellamy Blake. He plays Bellamy Blake. And I modeled Carson's like physical appearance off of him. More than anyone else, and like I tweaked it a bit. It's not exactly the same, but like I would if Bob Morley was like 10 years younger, I don't even know how old he is, but he looks older than 17. And so if he was younger though, I would definitely be like him 100%. That's Carson, like that's my main character. But other characters I don't know.
It's definitely difficult for producers when they option a series, because if there's still more work to come out, that is definitely an issue they've got to think of. I'm assuming they're looking at a completed series. I'm not sure, but that's definitely a concern. Okay, before we try and wrap this up soon, because we've gone past half an hour, we're good. There's no rush. I'd like to know from you guys individually what could kind of be this is kind of a morbid question we ask on the show. If you look back on your career, say down the line, after it's maybe finished, like really far down the line, what would you think success would look like for you guys as an author? It's a tough question, that one. Kaitlyn, have you got an answer?
Success for me, honestly, success for me would be just being able to get my return of investment. Return of investment is important to me, and maybe even be able to make just like a few $100 a month would be nice. Like I'm not looking for like riches and fame or anything like that, honestly. Like I mean, I know they say like, shoot for the stars and whatever else crap they tell you, but I don't disagree with that. I just like, that's not necessarily, I don't care so much for that. I care more about just getting that return on investment and being able to touch people's lives. And so like success to me would be more like getting that fan base, that small fan base that gets excited about your work. And then being able to, and a perk of that would be return of investment. That's pretty much for me. Like, I mean, I'm not going to stop there, but I would consider myself successful if I got there.
Amazing. Elizabeth?
I would I really want my books to help people see themselves differently. I've had I went through like really rough time with my mental health, and like the first basically my whole teen years I was clinically depressed, and fantasy books were what I looked at, and I was like, well, if this person can survive all of these horrible things, well then maybe I can get out of bed today. And I would I would never wish that on anyone, but if my books can be that for someone, that can encourage them or help them just start to picture that life could be different, that would be my ultimate goal. I would of course like to do this full time as well, but that is something I think about a lot. Just like these random authors who probably have no clue how much they supported my mental health during that really awful time in my life, and I would really like to do that for people.
Yes, an amazing answer. Amazing. Ziva, what about yourself?
It's pretty much similar to what they've said. If I look back, success for me would be being able to touch people's lives through my books, to give people hope, because I mean, this world can be a very dark place, and sometimes hope is literally all, like, people just need to know that, look, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, no matter how dark it gets, it's going to end. Like, just keep going and things will get better. And I feel like if I'm success for me would be being able to touch people's lives like that, give them hope. Like Kaitlyn said, have, even if it's just that little fan base of people, like fan base that get excited about your book and look forward to the next thing that's coming out. That would be really amazing for me. But knowing that my book changed a life, my book gave someone hope, my book inspired someone to write their own book, or to tell their own story, or to just live their own life, like that, for me, that would be everything for me.
Brilliant. That's a fantastic set of answers. Ziva, we'll start with you to finish off these questions, and we'll work our way around. What can we expect next from you? Where can people find out more about you? And of course, I'll leave links in the description. But where can they find out about your books?
On my website, my newsletter. If you join my sign up for my email newsletter, I do send one out every month. Probably will be sending some out sooner, more frequently rather. If you check out my website, it's xmokoye.com. You would find out more about me, what to expect next. The book 2 of my series is coming out next year. What month is it, Kaitlyn? In May. Sorry, because our series are like, our series are coming out like parallel, simultaneously.
I was going to say, I love the fact you asked someone else about when your book's out. That's brilliant.
Yeah, so book 2 of the series, book 2 of the Age of the Anathema series, it's titled Branded. It's coming out next year. That's really what's next, pretty much. This series is what's going on. So
amazing. Yeah. Elizabeth.
Yeah, so the third book in my Dangerous Assassin series, Dangerous Traitor, is coming out December 13th in all formats. You can find me and my books at elizabethwheatley.com. And I also have discounted ebooks, audiobooks, and paperbacks available there.
Brilliant. And Kaitlyn?
I have my rebranded book 1 of my rebranded series, The Forgotten Countrymen. They came out originally as novellas, and we're rebranding. Ziva and I are working together, actually, rebranding together this series as novels. And so we're pulling it all together, and we're republishing them. And so they're being edited and touched up, and it's just going to be amazing. There's going to be bonus content. It's going to be awesome. And that's coming out. The book 1 is coming out March 7th. Of 2023. So very soon we're going to be seeing a cover reveal coming up in November of that book. And so that's what's immediately next for me. I'm also working on, I've already written the draft for book 2 is already done. And book 3, I'm working on the rough draft of that one currently. Other than that, you can find me on my website at authorkaitlyndeann.com. And you can see what I'm doing over there. I I don't blog a whole lot, but when I do, it's important. So, and I do have a newsletter also. You can find it over on my website. And my newsletter, I send out exclusives, and I send out if you sign up, you get news ahead of time before anybody else, and you get exclusive bonus content.
Amazing. You're also busy, all of you.
Yeah.
Love it. Grafting, excellent. Definitely thank you all for coming on the show. It's been absolutely wonderful. And Elizabeth,
Thank you
everyone
for
seems so
having us.
excited about your books. We're gonna
Yes.
definitely get that out there. But honestly, I'll keep in touch with you socially, and when your books are out, just if I haven't shared it already, drop me a hint and I'll push that around for you guys. But thank you for sharing your stories with us, and for coming on and talking about fantasy. There's still so much in the world of fantasy we could talk about, but
we didn't even hardly scratch the surface.
I know,
of world building, to be honest.
Well, I could just organize another round when the next load of books are out,
part
and we'll
two.
go back into it. Part two. But thank you so much from me and from the audience, and please do keep in touch. And again, guys, if you're interested, I will put the links in the description so you don't have to go searching too far for them. And if you're listening back on the podcast or watching it back on YouTube, thank you very much. From me, it's goodbye, guys. Thank you again. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.